Welcome to the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast on YouTube. My name is Carey Nieuwhof, and my goal is to help you lead like never before. So what I do every week is I sit down with world-class leaders and church leaders, business leaders, and I talk to them about what made them who they are and try to have the conversation with them that you would have if you got to sit down for lunch with them or have dinner with them or really got to spend some time with them. So we go into the backstory and we explore what made them who they are and some of the principles they've learned along the way. So if you enjoy this episode, I would love for you to like it, to subscribe, and also to share it with your friends. And in the meantime, here's today's episode. Lecrae, welcome to the podcast. It's such an honor to have you.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Hey, so you and I had a chance to meet backstage at an event we did, I think in Dallas last year. Really hit it off, had a good conversation. And I said, man, it'd be great to have you on the podcast. You got a brand new book, which I actually have read cover to cover. Great book. And in it, you talk a lot about sort of the celebrity journey, your relationship with your faith, how you lost it, how you found it. But I want to talk about, because we all, particularly in this Instagram age, everybody wants to be famous. Everybody wants to be well known. Everybody wants to be recognized. But celebrity has pressures and surprises that I think a lot of people don't see. Can you start just by talking about some of the pressures and surprises you've had with the celebrity that's come your way?
Yeah, I think, the pressures of celebrity are really, some of them are self-imposed. Some of them, I think the biggest thing that I found is that the higher people exalt you, the more they demand of you to kind of fit whatever ideal they have. And when you don't live up to that in whatever respect, then they're a lot more eager to tear you down. So we tend to do that. We tend to build up our idols and tear them down just as fast. So I think I wasn't prepared to be praised as much as I was and criticized as much as I was. And just finding a space to find myself, to be myself. I actually talk about that on the album a lot, where, I just need the space to process because there's so many voices praising and criticizing all the time.
Yeah. Do you think that's true of all celebrities? Do you think, or do you think that's also like especially true in the church? I'm curious as to your perspective.
I think it's true of every public figure. That's going to be true. I do think there's a different expectation when it comes to the church of grace and love that you expect people to walk in. You expect a certain amount of wisdom, grace, love to be exemplified and offered. But I think we're a little harsher toward those in public spaces, if I'm honest. Yeah.
So the criticism and the praise were really kind of surprising. Anything else? Like you've been on the road an awful lot. Just describe what road life is like. I've been off the road now for 6 months, like I'm sure you have for the most part. And a lot of people used to travel a lot, but it's very different on the inside, I'm sure, than it looks like on the outside.
Yeah, I mean, being on the road is, initially it's glamorous. It's great. It's like, oh, wow, new cities, new places. But then it turns into work and it turns into, make this stop, do this interview, talk to these people, meet these people, perform, and you're going, and you're not really given the space to process, enjoy what's happening here. If you're having a bad day, there's no room for you to have a bad day because you've got to meet people and they're excited to meet you. And so, you get off the phone with your wife and she tells you your son is acting up. You're like, oh, and I've got to deal with this. And then I got to shake this person's hand. And in the back of my mind, there's chaos in my house. So it's not as glamorous especially for a married man with kids. It's a lot tougher because you're torn in two worlds at one time. A married person with kids.
A lot of people, because we think about this, and I know as a preacher myself, you kind of think, okay, the Christian story is a story of before and after. So before you met Jesus, this is what your life was, but now you got it all together, et cetera, et cetera. So it's sort of like before I was messed up, but now I'd love to get your take on that, because you're so honest and so raw in this book about some of the things that just weren't going well in the midst of it all. What do you think about that narrative where it's like all my problems are in the past, but here I am, and now things are together?
Yeah, I think what was really important to me with the book is chronicling what restoration looks like. Restoration is the journey, not the destination. Restoration is something that we're in a marathon, and you win a marathon by finishing it, not by coming in first, not by looking like you're better than this person or that person. And I think, that whole narrative, like, man, I was all messed up, and, but then I found the Lord and now I'm better. It's true in a spiritual sense. I was dead, now I'm alive. I did a song called Zombie that articulates just that point, right? I was dead, now I'm alive. But, it's like a child coming into this world. You're when a baby enters the world, it's going to take some time to learn how to walk. And when the baby's, when it gets a little older and it starts walking, what's the first thing you do when you see him taking steps? You clap like, good job, good job. And when the baby falls, we don't say, you stupid baby, what is wrong with you? Get up and walk. We say, oh, it's okay. Get back up. And then we encourage them to take more steps and more steps. We anticipate that throughout this process, the child is going to keep falling. And similarly, as believers, we're learning how to walk, in a broken world, and we're going to fall. And hopefully we get up and walk further than we did before. But there may be times when, I fell again. It's okay. Get up. Just don't stay down there. Get up and keep walking. And maybe you'll take more steps this time than you took before. And that's the narrative that I think is a much more healthier version.
In the book, you talk an awful lot about your childhood, and you share some things you haven't really shared before, at least not in that form. You talk about being sexually molested when you were a child, physically beat up, sleeping with a knife under your pillow because you feared for your safety as a child, and growing up not really knowing your dad really well. How do those wounds, how did they continue, and how do they continue to impact you as an adult?
Yeah, I think, and I say this every so often, that there's freedom in confession, but there's suffering in suppression. And I think as you suppress those wounds, as you keep those wounds closeted and you don't address them, they will create issues in your life. Those are traumas that you will have to navigate for the rest of your life in certain circumstances. But you have an opportunity to allow those traumas to cripple you and to keep you in a constant state of suppression and like fear, or you can allow those traumas to grow you, to strengthen you, to help you to say, you know what, I've endured some crazy things, and that's what's happened to me, in my life. I've endured some crazy things, but those things have shaped me and molded me and afforded me the ability to move forward, to climb higher heights, to do different things, to trust God, to be more dependent than I was historically. So again, I think pragmatically or practically, they affect my sense of security or insecurity, right? Mm-hmm. Like, who am I? So you've got to wrestle with those particular issues, and then you've got to really begin to do the work of understanding who you are and whose you are. And I think whereas the average person may have some identity issues here and there and say, man, who am I? A person who's experienced some traumatic things like that, they may have to revisit that a little more often, because they've got these narratives screaming at them.
Well, you tell stories about being a kid or a teenager, and are you man enough? And I think at one point, did you have relatives who were trying to get you into a fight and betting on you and that kind of stuff? How talk about that? Like how did those insecurities chase you into adulthood?
That's an interesting component. Every culture has ideals and values.
Yeah.
And so, what may be idealistic for one culture is a value for another. What may be a value for one culture is an ideal for another. So you can take, a group of people in the Polynesian Islands. It may not be, family's a different ideal than a group of people in London, right? There may have two different ideals and values of what family should be like. And in my culture, in my community, with all of the different issues that plagued our community, there was no time to be weak. You never knew what could happen at any given moment. You're walking down the street with a group of your friends, and a guy steps out, takes a bottle and smashes it up against one of your friends' faces, and it rips his face into shreds. And you're left there like, what am I supposed to do? And so it's kind of like this environment where you've got to be prepared at any given moment to deal with this kind of chaos. So, college, sure, that's an ideal. Value, you better be tough. That's a value because you need that in this space. And it was something that, man, I just became frustrated with because it seemed as if, there was no room for the nuance and the dynamic of who I was. It was just stone-faced, be tough, be prepared, be ready at all times. And I felt like there was so much more to me that I wasn't able to express and unleash. And I craved that freedom.
Was music an outlet for you in that respect? I remember there's a moment where I think it was some of your friends were fighting, and it's like, but Lecrae, he can rap. That kid can rap, right? Was that your like artistic outlet, your nuanced outlet?
Absolutely. That was my sanctuary. Being able to write and just put my ideas and my thoughts and express them. As I mentioned in the book, my aunt would send me postcards from different places she had traveled. She was she taught English in different countries around the world. And so I knew the world was bigger, and it would make me say, wait a minute, there's more out here. And I would just write and try to express. And then my mother always was an advocate of reading, so just read books, and I would escape in these books. Now, mind you, there are bloody wars going on outside, helicopters swirling around, sirens, and I am lost in a book, inside the house. Because for me, it was like, I know there's a bigger world than what I'm seeing. In some kind of way, I have to have an outlet to express, these things that I'm experiencing.
Remind me which city you grew up in. What city?
I grew up in between Houston, Texas, Denver, Southeast San Diego, and in Dallas. So multiple different places where I'm experiencing all these particular things.
But you were always in a particular neighborhood, grew up where things were rough, people weren't rich, that whole deal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Grew up on the streets. You talk, there's a certain point, and I want to chase a couple of things down you said already. You mentioned the word insecurity. So you've got tens of thousands of leaders listening. And I know in my own journey, I write about it in one of my books and talking to a lot of leaders. It's something leaders really struggle with, insecurity. Has that been a battle for you even as your career took off? Like, did you ever get over your insecurity? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I mean, insecurity, I think what a lot of leaders don't realize is they fuel their insecurities by achieving more. They fuel their insecurities by accomplishing more. What you are actually doing are wielding false senses of security to yourself. Every trophy behind me is a tool I can use to wield onto myself to protect myself against, the darts that aim at my insecurity. And so leaders, look how many followers I have. Look how big my church is. Look at how many people bought my book. all these things are ways you can wield a shield around your own insecurity without ever dealing with your insecurity, dealing with the root of it. And so what you begin to do is you begin to do what God never intended for you to do, is create your own sense of security with these inanimate objects or ideals of success, instead of recognizing that you have infinite worth and purpose, and it was bestowed upon you from birth. And so yes, with every accomplishment, you actually begin to blind yourself and numb yourself to the insecurities that you have until that fateful day when things don't work out, or when someone doesn't like what you said or what you did or buy your book. And then your world begins to crumble. And we see that happen with professional athletes all the time. As soon as they retire, they're asking themselves, who am I? Because they were shielded from, knowing who they truly were.
When you look back at your career so far, what would you say was the height for you?
I mean, on a, kind of on a material level, I would say, 2013 and 14 on a material level were probably like this combination of a highlight reel. I've continued to do things that I hadn't done before, but I think they were just consistently happening during that time period. It was like, bam, #1 album, bam, Grammy Awards, bam, Billboard Awards, bam, big artists want to feature you, bam, speaking at these conferences on massive stages. And it was just all within this like 1 year span of just like soaring and different opportunities coming at you, doing this world tour that sold out everywhere. And so I think on a material level, that was the most successful year. It was, but on a spiritual level, it was not successful at all.
We're going to go there. What was that like? Because I've had a conversation with a few people. We've watched a number of leaders implode publicly recently. And I've just been in some private conversations, and I'm like, well, look at the stratosphere. Like, they went from 0 to 60 in 2.5 seconds, and that is so much pressure. What did that feel like when all of a sudden your number one record in the world, not in a category, but in the world, you're on the stage in wherever they do the Grammys, I guess it's Hollywood, and they announce your name as the winner. Like, what is that like? What does that do to you?
Back then I could articulate to you that there was an internal battle with pursuing humility. There was, back then I wouldn't be able to articulate that to you. I could tell you that now. Like there was an internal battle with pursuing humility. At the time I just was like, what is happening? Because I didn't know, I didn't know any better. I went to the mall and bought a suit to wear to the Grammys. I didn't, it's like, it wasn't tailored. I don't know what is going on right now. When they called my name, I didn't think I would win it. So there was a sense of, like, what is happening right now? And, there was an internal wrestle with, okay, how do I pursue humility and yet be appreciative? And I didn't know what those emotions were at the time. I know now that's what I was battling. But you're trying to process, how do I stay down to earth? How do I stay connected? My friends, I felt like the air started changing around me and different conversations were happening. And it was like my friends it's like, hey man, I got to go talk to this person about this deal. And they're like, deal? What do you mean deal? Like, aren't we playing basketball? And I'm like, I can't. Man, I got to talk to, Dr. Dre and Pharrell are on the phone. And it's like, what? There's all, these massive things. And my friends are just like, I don't understand. Why are people screaming your name? What is going on here?
Because you've been Lecrae to them for years, right?
Exactly. So it was a mixture of me trying to walk in these new shoes and them trying to figure out what these shoes were, and just trying to, it's a lot to just process.
No, it's a lot to process. And all of a sudden, I think that's another thing that can happen. And, we got a number of leaders listening who are in high growth environments right now. Maybe it's not number one record in the world, but It's like all of a sudden it's 5 times, 10 times bigger than it was. Your friends change in a moment like that. Maybe you hang out and you're still playing basketball with the guys you've known since you were 16 on the one hand, but all of a sudden Pharrell and Dr. Dre call and all these artists want to feature you and producers are interested. Can you talk about that and what that was like in that moment when all of a sudden your phone starts ringing and you're like, you got to be kidding me?
Yeah. I'm not sure where I got the analogy, but there's an analogy that I remember of, when you start off with your team, because I started off with my home team and everyone around me helped me get to this place. And you start off with your team and you guys are all playing golf. It's like a golf game and everyone hits the ball. You're having a good conversation. And then it's like, all right, things are getting a little more intense in this basketball now. And everyone still touches the ball. We're still all on the court, but maybe some people shoot a little more than others, but then you just hit this plateau, this peak, and it's football. And it's like, your cousin who's been with you playing golf the whole time is like, hey, can I play? And you're like, I just need someone to kick. And you're not really a good kicker. So, this is rough because now you need all these specialized people around you. And if you don't know how to transition, which I didn't know how to transition well from that kind of friendly game of golf to like this specialized football, it is rough relationally. It is tough to navigate, that type of growth and that type of stretching. And so it took a lot of intentional conversations, a lot of processing with people. And there was some shrapnel, people were hurt in that process as well.
Well, it's interesting because I've never heard that analogy and I'm glad you shared it, but there's that saying that what got you here won't get you there. Right. And I think that's such a typical leadership journey where when it was the 6 of you going for lunch in that booth at your favorite restaurant and you were going to be together no matter what. And then things really take off and this guy leaves and you got to let this guy go. And next thing you know, it's a whole different crew of people. Any advice for leaders, knowing what you know now, because that was like 6 years ago, how would you replay that? Would you replay any of that relational weirdness differently?
Yeah, I think I would. You have to measure the connections because everyone has this idea that every connection is relational or every connection is transactional. And I think you have to temper that and you have to understand the dynamic of who you're dealing with and what that can potentially be. And so I'm very upfront with people when I feel like, hey, this is a contractual relationship and not a covenantal relational type of deal. Mm-hmm. I'm very upfront and I don't want to give off the idea or the vibe that we're going to be holding hands walking down this plane together. And just not in a rude way, but just not trying to sell anyone on the idea that, hey, we're going to go on this long journey, but just being honest and saying, hey, I don't know how this is going to go. I love what I've seen here. Let's try this out. Let's see this and we'll meet back up to see how this goes. And then gradually kind of pulling them into seeing if this is a more relational interaction. Because that's ultimately what causes a lot of the problems is that you've developed these deeper kind of friendships with people that you're on a contractual journey with. Yeah. And so that's tough. You know what I mean? It's tough. I mean, obviously you want to love everybody and you want to treat everybody fairly, of course. But at the same time, I have to let, the guy who comes to fix my sink, know like, hey man, I just want you to know, I don't know if you're going to be the same guy that's going to come next time my sink breaks.
Right, right. You might be a session player. Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So just making sure that those things are understood.
You're just going to play on this track. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, that's good. And I would say the other thing I've learned too is that people sometimes come in for a season, and that's okay. Have you seen that in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah. And seasons, that's not a bad thing. Right. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a bad thing that they're in your life for a season. I mean, that they're there for a specific reason and a specific goal, and you accomplish that goal together. And man, that was the point and the purpose of your connection.
So you do talk about that season when you hit number one in the world, when you won the Grammys. And I think the quote is at the height of your fame from the book. But you also said, and this is a quote, my life was a wreck. Talk about that disconnect between reaching the pinnacle and at the same time going, oh my gosh, I'm imploding. Mm-hmm. What was going on?
So number one, I mean, if you have unresolved historical trauma in your life, that's going to come for you, under stress. Yeah. Because if you never developed healthy coping mechanisms as a kid, or just even as an adult, when you're under stress, you're not going to have healthy coping mechanisms. And so what had happened for me was just not having developed those skills, not having dealt with a lot of those issues. I did not have healthy coping mechanisms. So I liken it to, there's a speedboat, there's a raft, there's a sailboat, and a speedboat leader is somebody who's just going to power through, like, I'm just going to power through this ocean. And you're not realizing that, yes, you have all this power and this propensity to just go far and fast right now, but you have not prepared yourself for running out of gas, and you're going to run out of gas eventually. And so, I ran out of gas like a speedboat, and it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And then, of course, you have other people out there who are rafts, and they're just like, I don't know where I'm going, and I'm just out here floating. And typically you look at those people and you say, look at those people. They have no direction. They don't know what they're doing. They're just out there aimlessly. That's why they're not leaders. And look at you now when you run out of gas. You're just like them.
Oh, wow.
You're just like them.
So true.
You did not have a plan. And so the ideal way that that you deal with that is you have to be a sailboat. And a sailboat, you're prepared for the different directions that the wind may blow. You're prepared. You have your sail like, okay, this is going to be a good one here. We can take advantage of this wind going in this direction, and we're not going to be stuck here. And it's just, you're understanding the environment and the volatility of everything around you, and you're prepared for what's coming your way. And so I think that is what I've had to learn, over the years, is that, man, you've got to deal with your stuff, and you've got to find preparation, because it's coming. If you're dependent on yourself and just you're going to run out of gas eventually.
You're pretty raw in the book. And so your speedboat runs out of gas, so to speak, in 2014-ish. What were some of your coping mechanisms that kind of got out of control? What were some of the things in your life that you're like, wow, I can't believe this is me?
Yeah. So firstly, it was, start subtly. It's not like I can't deal with all this. Give me something to help. It's subtle. It's kind of like, whew, what a long day at work. Let me have a beer. Right. It's like, what a long day. Let me have a beer. Well, when every day's a long day, then I need a beer every day. And then one beer is not helping me deal with the different levels of stress, because I'm not just working one job. I'm running a company. I have multiple irons in the fire. So I need a beer for every job I have going on here. And that began not a kind of sloppy drunk dependency. It just my body became adjusted to, this is what always takes my edge off. So I need a little more. I need something harder, something, give me a shot of this, give me 2 shots now. And my tolerance level would just go up.
Yeah.
And when you're on the road for 20 days and you need to decompress after everything, it's like, man, hit me with another one. And what begins to happen is you develop a dependency on that decompressant, that thing that helps you decompress. And you look up and you're like, I've been drinking for 20 days straight and I didn't even notice it. And you look up and you're like, it's not, you're numb to it now. It's olfactory fatigue. Like you don't even smell it, So it's like, this is normal. Of course we're going to get it. Absolutely. I'm gonna get on the flight, have a drink. I'm gonna do this, have a drink. And I didn't think I had a problem because it never showed itself as like this overt issue. But I did notice that, just my judgment would be impaired. So it was easier to make bad decisions. It was easier to swipe the card on something I didn't need after a few drinks. It's easier to be upset and be mad, at somebody and have a terrible conversation on the phone with my wife. It's easier to get wrapped up, in flirtatious behavior or pornography. It's way easier when you're intoxicated and you're ready you're myopic in your view of like what you need in that moment. So make a long story longer. It then became, I'm stressed out and I know it and I don't know what to do with it. And I had a crazy anxiety attack at, a basketball game. So I'm at first anxiety attack I've ever had. I was at a basketball game and, I'm sitting there waiting on my food. My wife is sitting there with me and, a fan says, "Hey, Lecrae." And I'm like, And I began to be on edge all the time. Like someone's going to say something, jump out, Lecrae, I don't have a peace. I know someone's going to want a picture, recognize me. And this person did that. And I was like, hey, okay. And I couldn't calm down. And I was like, whoa, I can't calm down. Like I'm still on edge. Like, what is this? This is weird. So when it wouldn't leave, I went to see a doctor and the doctor was like, hey, listen, try this Xanax and it'll calm you down. And that turned into another addiction. We all know about the opioid epidemic and benzos and so on and so forth. So it was like, I just, married 2 terrible spouses at one time in this season of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got that. And again, it's a prescription issue. Mm-hmm. So you're addicted to that. You got alcohol. Did you have people around you who started to notice the changes, who spoke into that? Or was it a self-realization? Or how did you kind of wake up and go, maybe that's an issue?
So the unique part about that was during this time period, there was, kind of a lot of the triggering for this was a lot of the racial tension going on in America. And so that added an immense amount of stress to everything else I was dealing with. So it wasn't just like, work stress. I've been dealing with work stress for 12 years at this time. It was compounded work stress with crazy amounts of criticism, seeing people dying, dealing with the racial issues in society and trying to process it all within just all these different spheres of life. So a lot of my friends, particularly my African-American friends, were grieving. A lot of them were struggling. A lot of them were in pain. So I think it was kind of like it was accepted. It was like, we understand. You had a little extra to drink tonight, but we know times are tough. You know what I mean? And so it was a little bit accepted. I mean, it was a little side eye like, you all right?
Yeah.
I'm good. Okay. All right. Just checking on you.
Just checking. Yeah.
Yeah, just checking on you. But no one, and then you got to remember, I'm at the top of the food chain. So people aren't they don't tell you no.
You're paying a lot of
often.
these people, right? Like, let's be
Exactly.
honest.
Yeah. So no one's telling you, they're like, well, you know better what to do than I know. You made it. So what do I know? Yeah.
Wow. You do, and I'm so grateful for it. You talk about the challenges of being Black in America, the legacy of slavery, and I thought you made some really interesting points. So let's go there. How has, I think this is a phrase I lifted directly from the book, the legacy of slavery impacted you here in the 21st century as someone who is honestly near the top of the food chain? Like how does that still impact you?
It's a good question. So, when you look at a company like Johnson and Johnson or even the Rockefellers, we see the work that the Rockefellers put in initially directly impacts the current Rockefeller family. It benefits them currently. So the inheritance passed down, and now, they can move forward in different ways and do different things, right? Conversely, when you have, so as crazy as my 3 times great grandmother, Emmeline, was brought here from West Africa, 9 years old. She's a slave. And, she becomes an adult, has my 2 times great grandmother, and they say, hey, slavery's over. Slavery's done. Well, that's awesome, except they didn't have any land, money. They couldn't read. They didn't have any resources. They had nothing. So they were literally faced with 2 options. One, to live on the side of the road with the clothes on their back, or 2, to take an opportunity to still work the land in Arkansas for their former slave master, and not get any payment for it, just be able to stay in their slave quarters. So if you work my land, you can stay in my slave quarters, and we'll work out this agreement. And so they did that. And eventually, so now we go to my great grandparents, Bishop Bryant. He's able to secure, through side jobs and little things like that, he's able to secure a little bit of a financial foundation to purchase a home. And, you get to my grandmother, who, in order to help keep up that home, had to quit school at 13. So her education level is 13-year-old. To my mother, who's got a mom with a 13-year-old education. And she's like, I don't know much about school or college or any of this. My mom's eating dirt to keep her stomach from growling. And my mom is like, all right, Lecrae, you're the first one. You did it. Don't let us down. And I've got all of that weight sitting on my shoulders to be like, all right, here we go. Let's figure this out. Let's do this for the generations before me and after me. And so that legacy, oh my goodness, is impactful, is weighty.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
This is a very emotional story. And I hadn't quite seen it that way, that legacy. It's like, wow, you're the first one. You're the first one to kind of escape, so to speak, this chain. And I think a lot of us who didn't have that background. So if I can go back a generation or two, I did do a degree in history. That arrangement where you're either at the side of the road or you can live here, that was sharecropping. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
So basically slavery in another form.
Sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about race and America, or you got a lot of leaders listening, obviously some Black and brown leaders, but a lot of white leaders too. Talk to us.
Yeah, I think it's, the current environment that we're in, I think lends itself to people being listeners and learners. You know, it lends itself to us. This is the temptation for leaders. Leaders are really good at doing things on the fly. Leaders are really good at cliff notes. As it pertains to race or ethnicity, we're talking about cultures now. You can't do cliff notes on cultures, right? You can't just you can't like read the cliff notes on India, get there and expect to understand what's happening. It doesn't work that way. So you've got to become a practitioner. You've got to get involved in these relationships. You've got to spend some time in India and like, okay, let me understand this and understand that, oh, that's why this is this and that is that. And so as it pertains to race and ethnicity and culture in America, I think it's very idealistic for us to think that American culture somehow blankets us. We're not the gumbo we think we are. You know, we're more like a salad. You know, there's clumsy pieces all over the place. And so it does take some investigation. It takes some listening. It takes some saying, okay, what do Black and brown people have to say? How can they teach me? And what can I learn? I can't do cliff notes. And the temptation is to virtue signal and to say, well, look at who I have on staff, or look at who I have in the room. I'm a part of the solution. Well, you're a part of the solution when you begin to practice the relational steps, you know, of getting to understand these cultural dynamics. And so that's just a lifelong journey. That's not something we're going to get overnight. It's a lifelong journey. I have to deal with that as a man and as it pertains to women. It's a lifelong journey for me to understand, you know, the differences that women experience in this world and in this society. And I can't just say, well, I'm married to a woman. I know what I'm doing. I got it figured out. I've got to say, no, this is a lifelong process.
So one thing that would have been really interesting I'm just going to ask the question, I don't know where it leads, but you would have had, knowing a little more of your history now, you would have had doors open to you that never would have opened for your mom, your dad, who you didn't really know, your forebears. Mm-hmm. What was that like when, for the first time, you're like, I can't believe this door is opening and I'm out of the neighborhood. This is for me. Yeah. What was that like for you?
Yeah. It's scary. Mm. And honestly, you live in that fear. It doesn't go away. You're constantly thinking poverty's about to come on you. I'll never forget sitting with my financial advisor and, you know, I had just made more money than anybody I knew in all of my family. Yeah. And I was like, oh God, I'm going to lose it all. You know, it just made me afraid. And he said, well, typically when you reach this level, you never go backwards. And I was like, you don't? Because I don't have any experience. I don't know how this works. You know, this is all news to me. So it's fear. It wasn't a sense of like, we made it, yay. It was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. How am I going to stay here? How am I going to keep everything afloat? And so, you know, I've had to teach myself to celebrate more. I've had to teach myself to stop, reflect, appreciate, be grateful way more than I ever have in the past.
I want to give you another quote from the book. The more you step away from your Blackness, the more the majority culture accepts you. Mm-hmm. You comment on that?
Yeah, so when we say, we got to define some terms because I'm sure people will hear that and not quite understand all those terms. So first, let's talk about majority culture. When we say majority culture, we're talking about the culture who has control, the dominant controlling culture. Because I mean, typically you may say, well, there's more Hispanics than white people in America at some point, you know, but it's really about who has the power. So when you look across the board, when you look across all the Fortune 500 companies, who is in charge? When you look across the wealthiest people in our country, who are they? And therein you're going to see like, okay, this is majority culture here, right? And in America, that's white people. And when I say blackness, we have to understand that this color, we're not really referencing color, we're referencing culture or ethnicity. Because I think some people think it's a skin thing. It's connected to skin, but it's way deeper than that. And so when I say blackness, what I'm talking about are those things that are usually culturally associated with people with this skin color, right?
Yep. Fair enough.
Okay, so
no, and I've had this conversation with a few other people too. Like Albert Tate has talked about it on this podcast. Sam Collier's talked about it, that there is a way to fit in, and we will accept you if you tick these boxes and do these things. So that's why I was really taken by that quote.
Absolutely. And so the more you let go of the things that are your cultural norms and embrace what the dominant culture, the culture who's structuring your society, the more you let go of your cultural norms and embrace theirs, the more they accept you, the more they tolerate in some senses. But so an example would be, I'm a black man. I have not, probably will not ever be a Seinfeld fan. It's no offense to Seinfeld. I just didn't grow up watching Seinfeld.
Fair enough.
So I may be missing out on something.
My wife would say you are, but that's okay. You keep going.
Yeah. But if I'm in a corporate setting and, it's a group of white men who are having a conversation about Seinfeld in jest, there's an expectation that I should know about this and appreciate this. Mm-hmm. And if I want to talk about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, then it's kind of like, I did catch an episode, love Will Smith, right? If I want to talk about Martin Lawrence's show, and so, those are those things. If you can let go of that and embrace more of this, let go of Fresh Prince and embrace more Seinfeld, you'll be more accepted here. It'll go better for you here. And so typically what people of color do, black people, in my experience, is we code switch. What I did is you switch the code. Let me change the channel, put on my assimilated black person, and turn off my full black person.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. As a guy who doesn't really follow sports, I can totally relate to that, because you get around all the football guys and they're like, well, you saw the college draft. I'm like, just don't say anything. Just smile, look nice. Right. Yeah. I have no idea what you're talking about, but that's really helpful. Now you had, you talk about church hurts are the worst hurts. And there was a period where you were really into Reformed theology, and you talk about that in the book. And you kind of got burned on that one. Do you want to go through what that dynamic was like for people? Because we see this is like my social media feed all day long, people arguing with each other. And you kind of like got really into it, and then they dropped you. What was that?
Man, I think, when you're someone with historical traumas like I have, wanting acceptance, lacking your father being in your life, you're clamoring for whatever that looks like. And I think what I found specifically like within the church community was like, hey, you don't have to fight for that anymore. We're your family now. And I was like, awesome. I have this family now. And it's almost like a child who's been adopted, and you're like, this is my new family. This is awesome. And then you one day you say, hey, what happened to my parents? And like, let's not talk about that. We don't want to talk about what happened to your parents. We're just focusing on this new family, this new world right here. But what I can't, I mean, but what my parents, like, can I know anything? We're not talking about your parents. And you feel this sense of like, but they're part of who I am. And this is why I'm here. And I mean, I appreciate, you, but I'm just saying, this is a part of me. And to be dropped by your adoptive parents is like, wow, did you ever love me? Did you ever love me in the first place? That's what it felt like.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
Yeah.
You referenced the book, The Body Keeps Score, a few times. And I want to get back into that period in 2014. And I know when you and I met last year, we ended up talking about depression. And I think you reference it as you kind of went through this period of depression and everything. How did your body keep score? And then talk about sort of the dark night of the soul that you went through, Lecrae.
Yeah, your body keeping the score is essentially our minds tell us, you had an altercation, or maybe you went through a nasty divorce. Your mind is like, well, that was 10 years ago. I've moved forward. But your body, whatever emotions that you felt, whatever stressors, essentially your brain chemistry, your brain has not just forgotten about that, right? You have told yourself that was forever ago, but your body chemistry is like, no. That has altered us. Mm-hmm. And now we don't forget that. You know what I mean? So it's like a bad injury. You may say it 10 years ago, but your leg is still messed up from that injury. So that's ultimately what it was. And so for me, a lot of my historical traumas, because I hadn't dealt with them, when you go to sleep at night, your eyes, REM sleep, your eyes move back side to side. What that's doing is your brain is actually processing and reconciling everything that you've gone through. And I had not had that reconciliation of the soul, so to speak, of all of those particular traumas that I had had. And so I just distinctly remember the breakdown. I remember the stress. It was kind of like a build up. It'd be like, the stress of not living not being able to reconcile who's real, who's not real, what's up, what's down. I'm stressed out about this. And then just saying, man, I'm throwing it all to the wind. I don't know what I believe anymore. And I'm moving how I want to move. Well, now your moral compass is off and you're wondering, is this wrong? Is this right? Did somebody see me on this website? Did somebody not? And you're adding all these things. So for me, what it ended up happening was those many panics, many wonderings, and many stressors culminated and just came to a head after a long night of drinking. And I woke up and I was like, whoa, what a night. Ooh, I still feel kind of groggy. This is weird. What is this? Wait, what is this feeling? Wait, this won't go away. This is like a fog. And it was like this fog that wouldn't allow me to tell how beautiful the trees were or the sky was blue. It was just a darkness that sat on me, and I could not shake it, and so
I know all about that.
You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it wasn't like a long night of drinking, but it was a morning with the sun was there, but I couldn't see it. How long did that last for you, Lecrae?
Oh boy. Sheesh. I think, it was kind of on and off. Like what my brain would do is kind of have these like, and we're back. And then it was like, I'm normal. And then it would like someone shut the power back off again. So, man, I think that happened for a good, from a good 2 to 3 months, in that space. And it was dark. And even on month 3, as I'm crawling out of it, it wasn't overnight. It's kind of like month 3 happened, but you have to deal with the fear of going back there, which could take you back there because you're so
that
afraid.
Took me years to get over that fear that I was going to go back.
Exactly. So I'm now probably 18 months removed from that day, and I now have to battle the anxiety of going into a depression. And that's the crazy part. So that's the part of the work that I've had to do over the years.
Are you hypersensitive to anything that you think might lead you back there? I remember almost like a trigger. If I got tired because I didn't sleep well, or there was a time zone change, or it was just a really busy period at work. Now, so I'm 12 years on the other, 13, 14 years on the other side of my burnout. But for about 5 or 6 years, I was like, if anything felt like that or reminded me of that, I almost went into this hyper vigilant state of, I can't go back, because you lose control, right? You lose control when you're depressed like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I definitely try not to think about it. I try not to think about that time period. That's been a part of it. Obviously, I think the scarier part, mine was this weird combination of acute anxiety and depression. So it was this weird combo where, the acute anxiety made me very agoraphobic and afraid to be around people. And I was freaking out and just didn't know what was going on. So it is that combination of man, if I don't get enough rest, I'll be anxious. And what does that anxiety lead to? It leads to a panic attack. What does that panic attack lead to? It leads to depression. And I was like, and so it's this whole cocktail. But I've done this process, which I think is phenomenal. I highly recommend it, called EMDR. And it's where they use stimulators, whether it's light or sound or motions, to do the work you're supposed to do when you're asleep in reconciling everything that you've experienced. So it's used for trauma. And the best way I could describe it is that there's a woman who was robbed at gunpoint. A gun was pointing to her head, and she survived. But now every time she looks over her right shoulder, she sees a gun and freaks out. Well, she did EMDR, and that process helped her to reconcile it. So little by little now she can look over that shoulder. She sees speckles, but she doesn't see a person with a gun. She knows something's there, but it's not what it was, and she's able to function. And I think that's kind of what happened for me, is I know this all happened, but I can process it and talk through it.
If you don't know the answer to this next question, we'll Google it and put it in the show notes. Do you know what EMDR stands for offhand? I don't. I do not.
Man.
It's a therapy. It's like a trauma therapy.
Yes.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll just put it in the show notes. So we'll figure that out. Now, that was also a faith crisis for you, which is sort of the center of the book, I Am Restored. And Lecrae, you know as well as anybody listening to this podcast, this is an era of a ton of deconversion stories. And as I'm getting to know you and read through your story, you could have been number 1086 on the deconversion story. Talk about how you lost your faith and then how you kind of reconstructed it, because you would consider yourself a Christian, you would consider yourself a person of faith, but it's a different kind of faith maybe than you had a decade ago. So walk us through that, the deconversion and the reconversion.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I call the book I'm Restored. I think it was more like my faith was restored, what essentially, and I know there's lots of different philosophies or theological perspectives on this. I think that I let go of God, but he never let go of me. And so I think that is ultimately what happened. It's that I can say, I don't believe this stuff. And God was like, it's too late. It's too late. You're already a part of this family, buddy. There's no way out of this. So what essentially was happening for me was I experienced so much church hurt, so much trauma dealing with people within the church. I had no other vantage points of what faith looked like outside of this context that I said, I want nothing to do with it, and it's ironic because it wasn't like I visited, a Korean church and was like, when I said I was done with the church, I hadn't been to all the churches in the world. So
Yeah.
have I been to all of them? Are you done with them all? It's like, well, no, but my experience is enough for me to say I'm done with it. And so I didn't imagine that my experience was a context. I just thought my experience was the experience. And so clearly, if God is allowing all of this turmoil and pain and rejection from these people that I looked up to and that I consider family, then he's not real, because they're telling me I'm crazy for bringing up these inconsistencies. And so either I'm crazy or they're crazy, but there's more of them than me. So I said, oh, this is a cult. I don't believe this isn't real. And I was done with it. Now, what I will say is this: I can't say this for everybody, but for many people, behind the decision to turn your back on God, oftentimes is a desire for some sort of personal freedom, whether it's hedonistic, whatever it is. There's some sort of undergirding thing that you were hindered from having if you were consistent with this following of God. So maybe
I think that's a very astute observation. Yep.
Yes, there's always that. It's like, I really want to love money, but he hinders me from loving money if I'm really serious about my faith. But if he's not real, I get to love money. And so, for me, there was that coupled with the pain and the turmoil. There was that sense of, I want to be mad at folks. I want to be angry at them. I want to hate them. Just being candid. My wife, who's amazing, she's wonderful. But I was like, shoot, I'm a superstar. What if I was single? What would that look like? You know what I mean? Who else could I date out here? What celebrities could I, people get remarried to celebrities, and all these thoughts of what could be if God is not real, because then I'm not bound by these moral obligations. So all of that was coupled in there as well. And so, I said, well, I'm out. And I told my friends, because I wasn't passive aggressive about it. I was like, man, I don't think this stuff is real. And they thought, oh, you're going through a phase. It's fine. You'll be all right. You'll work through this. And I was like, I don't think so. I told my wife, I said, I don't believe this stuff anymore. I'm not doing Bible study with the kids. I don't know what I believe right now. And that was a very traumatic time in my family. Yeah. It was very difficult. It was like, what is he going to do? And what are the rules? What rules do we abide by? Because when you come together under this idea of faith, there's at least a standard that you both kind of agree to. Well, if one person is like, I don't really have a moral standard, moral compass. So how can I discipline children? I can discipline them whatever way I see fit. I don't know what's the moral standard here, So that was a really tough time. And I wrestled with these philosophical questions, and I wasn't lazy. I studied and I tried to figure out, and I was like, who are you, God? And where are you, God? And the reconstruction or the restoration of my faith was a process of, one, going to Egypt, seeing that this, God is dealing with a historical narrative way beyond my little 500 years in America. And I saw some amazing things there. And then it just continued from there. Can
you tell that little story, if you remember it? I don't want to put you on the spot, about the tour guide in Egypt. Yeah, that was awesome.
So we're in Egypt, and I'm there trying to restore my marriage. I'm there trying to battle with everything that I have going on. And I said, if I'm going to hear, I really didn't go to hear from God. I just came like, I was like, God, show me something if you're real. I don't know, but show up. I'm here. And we went on a tour. We get to, these tombs. And we're going through the tombs and we're seeing all these ancient pharaohs and our tour guide, she's a Egyptian history expert. She's brilliant, not a Christian at all, and shows us this particular pharaoh. And she's like, "Oh, this guy, he's frowned upon. That's why there's not much about him, and there's no monuments or anything about him." And I was like, "Why is he frowned upon?" And she said, "Oh, because he let so many of the slaves go." And I was like, "She let the slaves? Wait, he let the slaves go? Like, you mean like Moses? Like?" And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm saying, like, in the Bible, the Pharaoh let all the slaves go. And she's like, I don't know the Bible, but this Pharaoh let all of the slaves go, and he's frowned upon in Egypt. And I said, now listen, I don't know if this is historically accurate or connected, but it's enough evidence for me to come. It was like God saying, now, do you want to come back or no? Do you, I'm extending my hand to you. And that began my restorative journey with God.
How is it going to be different moving forward for you? Like, this is, I think, a defining moment for the church. And I think we're being called out on our judgmentalism, our cancel culture, where if you don't exactly fit what I believe, you're done, you're banished. I would love to know sort of your vision and your heart for the restored or reconstructed Christianity that you are a part of.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's understanding that everybody has something to offer. And I think that's what we fail to realize is that, everyone has something to offer. You don't have to fully agree with this particular view, but there's something in there that you may, that may be God endorsed and helpful. And I think we have to be okay with that, is saying there may be something here. We are cancel culture, and we will say, man, if you don't get it all right, then nothing you have to say is worth hearing. You know what I mean? And I think that is very opposite of what God calls us to be. He doesn't call us to cancel, hold accountable, accountability culture, sure, not cancel. And what has changed for me, honestly, is that it's been cultural context. I think that is a huge problem for us in America, because we forget that we live under a particular cultural context that reads into everything that we see with that Western cultural context. The scriptures were written in an Eastern world, an Eastern context. Things don't mean the same thing. And so just a little small example, there's a verse that talks about their throats are an open grave. Mm-hmm. And I remember reading that in my kind of American Western cultural context of thinking of a graveyard, like, oh, it's like a graveyard. So it's like an open grave. And I'm just imagining, like, I guess, you can fall in that hole, and that's what it's like, and I'm reading my cultural context into that, not realizing that when it was written, it was talking about tombs where there were no coffins. It was just bodies wrapped in linens. And so if the grave was open, it would smell horrendous. The idea they're trying to give across is that their throats stink. What's coming out smells, it's foul. And if I don't understand that, I miss so much. So that's what's happened for me, is I've been able to say, you know what, man, we're all, gonna miss the mark because of so many cultural differences and nuances. So everyone's got something to offer. And let me keep trying to grow and understand the original intent. Let me keep growing and trying to understand what God is trying to say.
I think a lot of us have some near deconversion moments. Mine happened in my early 20s, and I just couldn't shake that. I think this is the most true stuff I've ever encountered in my life to date, and would affirm that all these years later. What was it for you? Was there a moment or a sensation where you were like, yeah, that's why I didn't deconvert. That's why I didn't just keep walking down that road. Was there something that there was that Egypt thing, but was there a moment or a truth that just like pulled you back?
Yeah, well, I think it's seeing the consistency. So when you see the consistency of God staying with me, just like, oh, wow, Jesus isn't going anywhere. He's not transactional either. He's not snapping his fingers like, I'll fix it for you here. He's relational. He's saying, I'm going to walk with you through this. I'm going to be here for you in this whole process. I think we want transaction. We want a microwave solution for these profound moments. But, our trials are meant to develop us. Temptation's meant to destroy us, but the trials are meant to develop us. And so I think it was realizing I was being developed. I think it was being okay with that and saying, I don't have a better solution. And I'll be honest with you, if I'm, the real issue for me narrowed down to, I do believe I'm valuable. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm going to be honest with myself, I cannot treat myself to a steak dinner and tell myself that I'm so wonderful. And I can't, if I believe I'm a cosmic accident and just a bunch of atoms and cells, there's no reason to stand up for the rights of people. There's no reason. We don't matter. There's no purpose. We're just cells and atoms. We are nothing more than blades of grass. And if that's the case, then why do I want purpose when I wake up? Why do I feel like I need to take care of things? And so that's what really got me was I believe I have purpose. And if I have purpose, it was given to me by someone greater than myself. And that really was like, all right, I can't reconcile that. So it's got to be God.
Thanks for being so open, transparent. And you continue to make music. You got a new album, you got a new book. So tell us what you're up to and where we can find all things Lecrae.
Yeah, Lecrae.com. The album is Restoration. It is due out this month in August. The album is I Am Restored. The book is I Am Restored, which is obviously out in October. A documentary will precede the album. And I am really in literally the best season of my life. Mm-hmm. And it's not because everything's going my way. It's not because the pandemic somehow is not at my doorstep. It is because I have healthy mechanisms of dealing with the circumstances around me and a healthy vantage point to look at everything from. So,
well, thanks for saying yes to the invitation, Lecrae, and I've really enjoyed this time with you. Thank you for being so transparent, open, honest, and we're all on a similar journey. It may not be full of Grammys, but as leaders, we know what that's like to be in some spotlight, big or small, and have all the pressures of trying to keep it together. So hopefully this won't be the last time we have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, I hope today's episode was helpful to you. You can always get more by subscribing to my channel. I also have a lot more content over at CareyNieuwhof.com for leaders in business and leaders in churches. And you can get transcripts of this episode there and so much more, plus some other stuff I do for leaders. So head on over there to discover more at CareyNieuwhof.com. And in the meantime, I really hope our time together today has helped you lead like never before.